what is being the abduction of the 200, I think now almost 300 plus girls by this group that's called Boko Haram. Now, you've written recently that while you don't know exactly what's going on there, you have a few question marks about it, and in particular about this group Boko Haram. You said that they pretty much appeared on the scene as a fully formed group, which is not really in keeping with the formation of any of these different types of guerrilla organizations that you've studied around the world.
Well, that's true, and I don't profess to be the world's foremost expert on Boko Haram, but I do have a good sense of that organization, at least as much as one can, and certainly the geopolitical aspect of what's happening in Nigeria. I think that first and foremost, I should say that it's a horrific crime what has been done with these girls, assuming that the reports are true, and I have no reason to doubt that they are. It's a horrific crime and something that is almost unspeakable. But that being said, what I wrote was simply that Boko Haram is a very shadowy organization, and it is unclear exactly who leads them, if anybody. It is unclear exactly what their true ideology is, other than their claims of being anti-Christian and pro-Sharia law. But this is boilerplate language for terror groups, Islamist groups around the world. So I don't think that really gives any indication as to who they are. Eyewitness reports, people that I've spoken to in Nigeria talk about Boko Haram coming on the scene around late 2009, 2010, and seemingly emerging out of nowhere with an entire structure, with a leadership, with some kind of financial backing and so forth. And I think all of this is very suspect, at least in my mind. If you look at the way that terror organizations have developed, whether you're talking about Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, the Libyan Islamic fighting group Ansar al-Din in Mali, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, any of these organizations, you can trace their lineage to previous organizations, to other leaders, splinter groups. You can trace them back decades and kind of develop an entire terrorist family tree for each organization. And yet for Boko Haram, we don't seem to be able to do that. And my question is why? Where exactly did they come from? Who exactly is providing support to them, financial support and support with material support? So I think that these questions remain unanswered. And I guess what I'm implying with that is, to what degree is Western intelligence involved in this? I'm not saying definitively that they are, but I certainly would not discount that possibility. As we know, the CIA and MI6 and the other Western intelligence agencies, Mossad included, have a long history of financing terrorism, of using terrorism for their own political aims. So I don't think that that's at all out of the question. I also would add that Boko Haram exists against the backdrop of a very complex political landscape in Nigeria. I think a lot of people who may not follow it closely would be surprised to learn that not only is Nigeria not really a unified country, the federalized system that they have being what it is, but Nigeria is also rife with ethnic divisions that go back many generations. Remember that Nigeria is a colony, a former colony, and as with all of the African post-colonial states, it is essentially an outgrowth of British imperial policy. And so in the north of Nigeria, you have the Muslim territory, primarily Muslim. In the south of Nigeria is primarily Christian. You have also ethnic divisions. You have Yoruba and Igbo and other ethnic minorities, Yoruba and Igbo being the two most predominant ethnic groups in Nigeria. You have Yoruba activists who are agitating for secession away from Nigeria in the southeast of the country, along the lines of the old Biafra movement and the revolutionary Biafra movement in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And all of this is what is happening in Nigeria, and it is within this ethnic and religious maelstrom that Boko Haram has emerged. And I think there are a lot of people there are a lot of people in Nigeria and a lot of people around the world who are wondering, to what degree is Boko Haram even real? Is Boko Haram real, or is Boko Haram just another brand like Al-Qaeda, a name, a term of designation that has been given to a loose assortment of individuals and small groups that are used by someone to further their agenda? And, I try to be definitive, but in this case I'm being deliberately vague, because I don't want to say that we know definitively anything about Boko Haram. All we know for certain is that we know very little for certain.
Okay, so could this be in some ways connected with an attempt to destabilize the region? A number of countries in Africa are forming quite strong relationships with China. And again, this could be just another destabilization tactic for resources.
Oh, yes, indeed. I think that aspect of it is very important to touch on. Nigeria is a critical trading partner of China. China has extensive economic ties to Nigeria in the energy sector, but also in the satellite and communications sector, also in the infrastructure sector, and in the railroads, and many, many other aspects of the Nigerian economy where China figures prominently. But also, I would add that the West has major interests in Nigeria as well. Remember that the Niger Delta is one of the principal locations for Western major oil corporations, particularly Royal Dutch Shell, BP, Chevron, and one or two others that are operating there. And so there's a lot to be gained, not necessarily for the energy corporations, but for the West generally. A lot to be gained by kicking China out of Nigeria, kicking China out of West Africa. And I think I would also tie into this that a lot of the unrest that you've seen in North Africa in the post-Libya period, post-Libyan war period, the unrest in Mali, the unrest in Algeria, the unrest in Tunisia, the unrest all over the place, this is also having a trickle-down effect into West Africa as well. So it's a complicated mixture of many different factors that come together to make it such a volatile situation there. But again, I say, the situation with these girls is absolutely tragic. It almost I almost struggle for words to describe how that makes me feel. However, we should all be very, very cautious indeed of the fact that it is precisely this type of an incident that tugs at the heartstrings of Western liberals all over the world. It is precisely this type of incident that is used to justify interventions and an increased military presence. We remember very clearly the hashtag Kony 2012 yes. movement, the idea of putting U.S. and Western troops into Uganda to theoretically hunt down the Lord's Resistance Army and Joseph Kony. Of course, a transparent attempt to justify a military presence in the Great Lakes region as if they didn't already have one. And I see a lot of similarities between that Kony 2012 and what you're seeing in terms of the public outcry around the situation in Nigeria. Now, certainly what's happened to these girls is real, unlike the fabricated story of Kony, but the way in which it is becoming a cause célèbre by Western liberal imperialists, this is a very, very dangerous situation. Once you see Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the other organs of soft power becoming the vanguard for an imperial intervention, once that happens, well, then we're one step away from yet another aggression.
That's very interesting, the reference you made to Kony 2012, because there was connections between that and the Ukrainian girl video that I mentioned earlier Absolutely. On. The people are behind that.
Yes, indeed.
And then just one final one for you. It's been reported on some international media, and I suppose this is kind of touches on what you mentioned already, that the FBI have offered assistance to recover these girls. Of all the abductions and massacres I've seen and heard around the world, and some massacres that we've had in Ireland, I've never, I haven't too often heard of the FBI offering their assistance. Is that a strange one?
Well, it doesn't come as a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Just as I just said.
Yeah.
But it should not come as a surprise. Look, Nigeria is one of the most critical countries in all of Africa. It is one of the most strategically important countries, perhaps in the entire global South. Certainly from the perspective of China and the United States. So naturally, the United States wants to get its foothold even further into Nigeria, and I think that this is a perfect pretext for that. And I think also we should remember that Nigeria is really all of West Africa is a very complicated region with a complicated history that I certainly am not an expert on, and I think most people really have maybe a vague understanding of, and it is a misunderstanding of this region, specifically of Nigeria, that has led to a lot of bloodshed, particularly fomented by the West in recent years. And I think a good example of that would be Sierra Leone and the war in Sierra Leone, much of the killings in Ivory Coast and elsewhere. So we should remember the bloody history of West Africa and the West's role in that bloody history. And the fact that the United States wants to have a presence in Nigeria doesn't come as a surprise to anybody. What I think we should be very clear about, though, is that AFRICOM and the expansion of AFRICOM has coincided with the rise, not the decline, the rise of terrorism in Nigeria, the rise of terrorism in Mali, the rise of terrorism all throughout the region, and that should not come as a surprise to anybody who knows what AFRICOM is really about.
Eric Draitser, independent geopolitical analyst and founder of Stop Imperialism, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.